Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the Sandwell Aquatics Centre for the 2024 British Championships. Welcome to this morning's events, which will feature the following: Boys B 3 metre, Boys A 1 metre, Girls B 3 metre and Girls A platform. Our thanks go to our sponsors and partners with whom this event would not be possible. Aquatics GB, funding partner UK Sport, official partner Speedo and Labara, official suppliers SOS and Healthspan, our endorsed product Dive Recorder, and of course our host venue SLT Creating an Active Sandwell. We would like to thank all our volunteers without which this event would not be possible. Just to advise that there will be no parades for prelims, but we will be parading for the finals. And just a reminder that this event is live streamed on YouTube, on youtube.com/aquatics_GB. And if you weren't able to write that down, it's being shown on the scoreboard. Thank you. And the athletes in the first two events of this morning, the Group A Boys 1 metre preliminary, are as follows. Start 1, Todd Geggers from Southend Diving. Start 2, Noah Penman from Aberdeen Diving Club. Start 3, Daniel Chase, City of Leeds Diving Club. Start 4, Lewis Nielsen, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Start 5, Joseph Verity, City of Bradford Esprit Diving Club. Start 6, Oliver Heath, Plymouth Diving Club. Start 7, Noah Bartle, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Start 8, Lucas Clayton, Dive London Aquatics Club. Start 9, Bryn James, Southampton Diving Academy. Start 10, Archie Waves, Plymouth Diving Club. Start 11, Lachlan Starr, Edinburgh Diving Club. Start 12, Adam Turl, Southampton Diving Academy. And start 13, Conor Lano from Southend Diving. And your officials, your referee and Judge 1, Susie Bamber. Judge 2, Bill Clark. Judge 3, Emily Saunders. Judge 4, Kim Young. And Judge 5, Kim White. And the start list in the Group B Boys 3 metre preliminary. Start 1, diving as a guest, Jackson Monas from Aces Diving Club. Start 2, Noah Underwood, Plymouth Diving Club. Start 3, Jed Brown, Southampton Diving Academy. Start 4, Andre Golovati, Southampton Diving Academy. Start 5, Simeon Gregg, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Start 6, Sebastian Wilcox, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Start 7, Finn McFarlane, Cambridge Dive Team. And start 8, Robbie Wood, City of Sheffield Diving Club. And your officials, referee and Judge 1, James Hadley. Judge 2, Jane Ogden. Judge 3, Nigel Mills. Judge 4, Thomas Screeton. And Judge 5, Vito Gutierrez. Can we ask for all athletes to make their way towards their respective boards? And can we have judges to seats, please? Okay, we're ready to make a start for the Group A Boys 1 metre preliminary. Our first diver, Todd Gegger, Southend Diving. Forward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
And on the boys B 3 metre, our first diver is Jackson Monas from Aces Diving. Inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Seven and a half, 8.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 6.5.
Noah Penman, Aberdeen Diving Club. Inward dive, pike.
Noah Underwood, Plymouth Diving. Inward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
Seven and a half, 7, 7, 7.5, 7.5. Daniel Chase, City of Leeds Diving Club. Back dive, bite.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6. Jed Brown, Southampton Diving. Forward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
6.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 4.5. Lewis Nielsen, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Inward dive, pike.
6, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 6. Andre Golovati, Southampton Diving. Forward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 7. Josie Ferretti, City of Bradford Esprit Diving Club. Inward dive, pike.
6.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Simeon Gregg, City of Sheffield. Forward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
5.5, 5, 5, 4.5, 5.5.
6.5, 6, 5.5, 6.5, 6.5.
Oliver Heath, Plymouth Diving Club. Back dive, pike.
Sebastian Wilcox, City of Sheffield. Forward 1.5 somersaults, pike. 7, 6, 6.5, 6, 6.5.
7.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7.5, 7.
Finn McFarlane, Cambridge Dive Team. Inward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
Noah Bartle, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Forward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
6.5, 7, 7, 6.5, 6.5.
5.5, 6, 6, 6.5, 6.
Robbie Wood, City of Sheffield. Forward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
Lucas Clayton, Dive London Aquatics Club. Inward dive, pike.
7.5, 7, 7.5, 7, 7. Round 2, Jackson, back dive, pike.
6.5, 6.5, 7, 6, 6.5. Bryn James, Southampton Diving Academy. Inward dive, pike.
6.5, 7.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7. Noah, forward, 1.5 somersaults, pike.
7, 7, 7, 7, 8. Archie Waits, Plymouth Diving Club. Inward dive, pike.
6, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6.5. Jed, inward, 1.5 somersaults, pike.
7, 7, 6.5, 7, 7.5. Lachlan Stark, Edinburgh Diving Club. Inward dive, pike. 7.5, 7.5, 7, 7, 7.5.
6, 7, 6, 5.5, 6.5.
Adam Turl, Southampton Diving Academy. Forward dive, pike.
Andre, inward, 1.5 somersaults, pike.
5.5, 6, 6, 6, 5.5.
6.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5, 6.
Conor Lano, Southend Diving. Forward 1.5 somersaults with tupper.
Simeon, back dive, pike.
7, 7.5, 7, 7, 6.5. Round 2, Todd, back dive, pike.
7.5, 7, 7, 7, 6.5. Sebastian, back dive, pike. 6, 6.5, 7, 6, 6.
7.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 6.5.
Finn, forward, 1.5 somersaults, pike.
Noah, forward 1.5 somersaults with tug.
6, 6, 7, 5.5, 6.5.
6.5, 7, 6, 7, 7.5.
Robbie, back dive, pike.
Daniel, forward 1.5 somersaults, pike. 5.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5.
7, 7.5, 8, 7, 7.
Lewis, forward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
Round 3, Jackson, reverse dive, pike.
7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5. Joseph, forward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
6.5, 6, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5. Noah, back dive, pike.
6, 7, 7, 7, 6.5. Oliver, forward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
6, 7, 6, 5.5, 6.5. Jed, back dive, pint.
7, 8, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 8. Noah, back dive, pint.
5.5, 5.5, 5, 5, 6. Andre, back dive, pint.
5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Lucas, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 6, 6. Simeon, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5.5, 5.5, 6, 5, 5.5. Bryn, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
6, 6, 6, 6, 6.5. Sebastian, reverse dive, pint.
7, 7, 7, 8, 7. Archie, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
6, 6, 6, 6, 5.5. Finn, back dive, pint.
7, 8, 8, 8, 7.5.
6.5, 7.5, 8, 6, 7.
Lachlan, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
Robbie, reverse dive, pint.
7.5, 7, 7, 7.5, 7.
6, 6, 5.5, 6, 6.
Adam, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Round 4, Jackson, forward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Judge 4, please.
6.5, 6, 7, 6.5, 7. Noah, reverse dive, pint.
4, please. 6, 5.5, 6.5, 7, 6.5. Connor, back dive, pint.
5, 5.5, 4.5, 5.5, 5.5. Jed, reverse dive, pint.
7, 7, 7, 6.5, 6.5. Round 3, Todd, reverse dive, pint.
5.5, 5.5, 6, 6, 5.5. Andre, reverse dive, pint.
6.5, 7.5, 6.5, 7, 7. Noah, back dive, pint.
6, 5, 6, 6, 6. Simeon, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
8, 7.5, 6.5, 7.5, 8. Daniel, inward dive, piked.
6, 5.5, 6, 6, 6. Sebastian, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
6, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7.5. Lewis, back dive, piked.
6, 6, 6, 6.5, 6. Finn, reverse dive, piked.
5.5, 5, 5, 6, 5.5. Joseph, back dive, straight.
6, 6, 6.5, 6, 6.5. Robbie, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
6, 6, 6, 5.5, 6.5. Oliver, inward dive, piked.
7, 7, 6, 6.5, 7. Round 5, Jackson, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, position free.
Seven and a half, 6.5, 7, 7, 7.5. Noah, reverse dive, piked.
6.5, 6, 6, 6, 6.5. Noah, back 1.5 somersaults, a half twist, position free.
6, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Lucas, back dive, piked.
3, please, thank you. 6, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 6.
5, 5.5, 6.5, 7, 6.
Jed, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, position free.
Bryn, back dive, piked.
6.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6.5. Andre, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, position free.
7, 7.5, 7, 7.5, 7.5. Archie, back dive, piked.
5.5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 6. Simeon, back 1.5 somersaults, a half twist, position free.
6.5, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 6. Lachlan, back dive, piked.
6.5, 6, 6, 5, 5.5. Sebastian, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, position free.
6.5, 7, 6, 7, 7. Adam, back dive, piked.
6 and a half, 6, 7, 6, 7. Fin, forward 1 and a half somersaults, 1 twist, position 3.
Six and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 7 and a half, 7. Connor, reverse dive, pint.
7, 6, 7, 6 and a half, 7. Robbie, forward 1 and a half somersaults, 1 twist, position 3.
Seven and a half, 7 and a half, 7 and a half, 7, 7 and a half.
5 and a half, 5 and a half, 4 and a half, 5 and a half, 5.
Round 4, Todd, inward dive, pint.
Round 6, Jackson, forward 3 and a half somersaults with tug.
Eight, 8, 7, 8, 8. Noah, reverse dive, pint.
Six, 6 and a half, 6, 6, 6 and a half. Noah, back 1 and a half somersaults, 1 and a half twists, position 3.
7 and a half, 7, 6 and a half, 7 and a half, 7. Daniel, reverse dive, pint. Six, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half. Lewis, reverse dive, pint.
5 and a half, 5, 5, 6, 6. Jed, forward 2 and a half somersaults, pint.
Six and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 7, 6. Joseph, reverse dive, straight.
5 and a half, 5 and a half, 5, 5 and a half, 5 and a half. Andre, forward 2 and a half somersaults, pint.
Two and a half, 4, 4, 3 and a half, 3 and a half. Oliver, reverse dive, pint.
6, 6, 5 and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half. Simeon, forward 2 and a half somersaults, 1 twist, pint.
Eight, 7 and a half, 8, 8, 8.
4 and a half, 4 and a half, 4 and a half, 5 and a half, 5.
Noah, inward dive, pint.
Sebastian, forward 2 and a half somersaults, 1 twist, pint. Five and a half, 5 and a half, 6, 5 and a half, 6 and a half.
6, 7, 6 and a half, 7 and a half, 7 and a half.
Finn, forward 2 and a half somersaults, pint.
Lucas, reverse dive, pint.
Six and a half, 6, 6, 6 and a half, 7.
5.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 4.5.
Robbie, back 1.5 somersaults, 2.5 twists, position 3.
Bryn, reverse dive, pint.
Three, 3.5, 3, 5.5, 2.5.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7.
Round 7. Jackson, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Archie, reverse dive, pint. Six, 7, 6, 6.5, 6.
4, 4.5, 4, 4, 4.5.
Lachlan, reverse dive, pint.
Noah, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Five, 5.5, 6, 6.5, 5.5. Adam, reverse dive, pint.
Three and a half, 4.5, 4, 4, 4. Jed, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
7, 6.5, 7, 7.5, 7.5. Connor, inward dive, pint.
Five and a half, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Andre, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
7, 6.5, 6.5, 7.5, 6.5. Round 5, Toll, reverse 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position.
Two, 3, 3, 2.5, 2.5. Simeon, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint.
7, 6, 6.5, 6, 6.5. Noah, reverse 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position.
6.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 6.5. Sebastian, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
7.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 7.5. Daniel, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
5.5, 5.5, 5, 5, 4.5. Finn, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5, 6, 5, 5. Lewis, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position.
6.5, 6, 6.5, 6, 6.5. Robbie, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
6.5, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 7. Joseph, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
5 and a half, 5, 5 and a half, 5 and a half, 5 and a half. Round 8. Jackson, reverse 2 and a half somersaults with tuck.
6 and a half, 7, 7, 6 and a half, 7. Oliver, reverse 1 and a half somersaults, half twist, free position.
Six and a half, 6, 6 and a half, 5, 7.
7 and a half, 8, 7 and a half, 7, 7.
Noah, back 2 and a half somersaults with tuck.
Noah, back 1 and a half somersaults, half twist, free position. Four and a half, 5, 6, 5 and a half, 5 and a half.
4 and a half, 5, 4 and a half, 5, 5.
Lucas, forward 1 and a half somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
Jed, back 2 and a half somersaults with tuck.
Six, 6, 5, 5, 5 and a half. Bryn, forward 1 and a half somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
5, 4 and a half, 4, 4 and a half, 4. Andre, reverse 2 and a half somersaults with tuck.
Seven, 7 and a half, 7, 7 and a half, 7 and a half. Archie, back 1 and a half somersaults, 1 and a half twists, free position.
3, 3 and a half, 3, 4, 3 and a half. Simeon, reverse 2 and a half somersaults with tuck.
6, 6, 5 and a half, 6 and a half, 5 and a half.
4 and a half, 5, 4 and a half, 5, 5.
Lachlan, forward 1 and a half somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
Sebastian, reverse 2 and a half somersaults with tuck.
6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6.
6, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 5, 6.
Adam, reverse 1 and a half somersaults, half twist, free position.
Finn, back 1 and a half somersaults, pint.
6 and a half, 7, 7, 7 and a half, 7 and a half.
5, 5, 5 and a half, 6, 6.
Connor, reverse 1 and a half somersaults, 1 and a half twists, free position.
Robbie, reverse 2 and a half somersaults with tuck. 5 and a half, 6 and a half, 6, 5, 5.
7, 6 and a half, 6, 6 and a half, 6 and a half.
Round 9, final round of dives. Jackson Monners, ace diving. Inward 2 and a half somersaults with tuck.
Round 6, Todd, back 1 and a half somersaults, pint. .
4, 4, 3.5, 5, 3.5.
4, 5.5, 5, 5, 4.
Noah Underwood, Plymouth diving, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Noah, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked.
Four and a half, 3.5, 4, 4, 4.5.
7, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 7.
Jed Brown, Southampton diving, forward 1.5 somersaults, 2 twists, position 3.
Daniel, back 1.5 somersaults, piked.
Five and a half, 5, 5, 5.5, 5.
6, 6, 6.5, 6, 5.5.
Andre Golovati, Southampton diving, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Lewis, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
Five, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.
7.5, 7, 7, 6, 7.
Simeon Gregg, City of Sheffield, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Joseph, forward 1.5 somersaults, 2 twists, free position.
Five and a half, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5.
4, 3.5, 2.5, 3, 2.5.
Sebastian Wilcox, City of Sheffield, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Oliver, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Five, 5, 5, 6, 5.5.
4.5, 4, 3.5, 4, 4.5.
Finn McFarlane, Cambridge 19, back 1.5 somersaults, a half twist, position 3.
Noah, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked.
Seven and a half, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 7.
5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5.
Final diver on 3 metre, Robbie Wood, City of Sheffield, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
Lucas, forward 1.5 somersaults, 2 twists, free position.
Seven, 7, 7, 6, 7.
1, 1, 3, 3.5, 2.5.
Thank you, divers, judges and recorders. We will have the results of the 3 metre after the conclusion of the 1 metre competition.
Bryn, forward 1.5 somersaults, 2 twists, free position. Seven and a half, 8, 7, 7. Archie inward, 1.5 somersaults, pike. Six and a half, 7, 6, 5.5, 6.5. Lachlan forward, 1.5 somersaults, 2 twists, 3 position. Six, 5.5, 6, 6, 5.5. Adam forward, 2.5 somersaults, piked. Five and a half, 5, 5, 5, 5.5. Connor inward, 1.5 somersaults, piked. Six and a half, 6.5, 6, 4.5, 6.5. Round 7, Todd forward, 3.5 somersaults, with tuck. Six and a half, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6. Noah back, 2.5 somersaults, with tuck. Three, 3.5, 1.5, 2.5. Daniel forward, 2.5 somersaults, piked. Five and a half, 5, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Lewis forward, 2.5 somersaults, piked. Seven, 7, 6.5, 6, 7. Joseph back, 2.5 somersaults, with tuck. Five, 4.5, 5.5, 3.5, 4.5. Oliver forward, 2.5 somersaults, piked. 7, 7, 7, 6, 6.5. Noah, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck. Six, 5.5, 6, 6, 6. Lucas, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Three, 3, 2, 2, 2.5. Bryn, back 1.5 somersaults, pint. Seven, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 7. Archie, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint. Six, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Lachlan, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint. Seven, 7, 7, 5.5, 6.5. Adam, back 1.5 somersaults, pint. Five, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Connor, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint. Eight, 7.5, 7.5, 7, 7.5. Round 8, Todd, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 8.5, 7.5, 8, 7.5, 8. Noah, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Six, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 6. Daniel, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint. 6.5, 6, 6, 6, 7. Lewis, back 1.5 somersaults, pike. Six and a half, 7, 7, 6.5, 7. Joseph, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Three and a half, 2.5, 2.5, 2, 3.5. Oliver, reverse 1.5 somersaults, piked. Seven and a half, 7.5, 7, 7, 7. Noah, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position. Five and a half, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Lucas, forward 3.5 somersaults with tuck. Two, 4, 3.5, 4, 3. Bryn, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Five and a half, 5, 5, 5, 5.5. Archie, back 1.5 somersaults, piked. Six and a half, 6.5, 6.5, 5, 7. Lachlan, back 1.5 somersaults, piked. Six, 6.5, 6, 6, 7.5. Adam, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Six, 6, 7, 7, 7. Connor back 1.5 somersaults, piked. Seven, 6.5, 6.5, 7.5, 7. Round 9, Todd, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Five, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 6. Noah inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Seven and a half, 7, 6.5, 7.5, 8. Daniel reverse 1.5 somersaults piked. Six and a half, 8, 6.5, 7, 7.5. Lewis reverse 1.5 somersaults piked. Seven and a half, 6.5, 7, 7, 7. Joseph inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Six, 6, 5, 7, 6. Oliver back 1.5 somersaults piked. Six and a half, 6, 6, 6.5, 5.5. Noah back 1.5 somersaults piked. Six, 6, 6, 6.5, 7.5. Lucas back 1.5 somersaults piked. Five, 4.5, 5, 5, 5.5. Bryn inward 1.5 somersaults piked. 7.5, 7, 7, 6.5, 7. Archie, reverse, 1.5 somersaults, pint. Four and a half, 5.5, 5.5, 4.5, 5.5. Lachlan, reverse, 2.5 somersaults, with tug. Six, 5.5, 6, 6, 6. Adam, reverse, 1.5 somersaults, pint. Five and a half, 5, 5, 5, 5.5. Corner, reverse, 1.5 somersaults, pint. Five, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5.5. Final round, Todd Gegger, South End diving. Forward, 1.5 somersaults, 2 twists, free position. Six and a half, 5.5, 6.5, 6, 5.5. Noah Penman, Aberdeen Diving Club. Reverse, 1.5 somersaults, 2.5 twists, free position. Six and a half, 6.5, 4.5, 6, 7.5. Daniel Chase, City of Leeds Diving Club. Back, 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position. Two and a half, 4, 4.5, 4.5, 2.5. Lewis Nielsen, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Forward, 1.5 somersaults, 2 twists, free position. Six and a half, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 7. Joseph Verity, City of Bradford Esprit Diving Club. Forward, 2.5 somersaults, pint. Six and a half, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 6.5. Oliver Heath, Plymouth Diving Club. Forward, 1.5 somersaults, 2 twists, free position. 7, 6, 7.5, 6.5, 6.5. Noah Bartle, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Inward, 1.5 somersaults, pint. Six, 6.5, 7, 6.5. Lucas Clayton, Diveland and Aquatics Club. Reverse 1.5 somersaults, pint. Four and a half, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Bryn James, Southampton Diving Academy. Forward 2.5 somersaults, pint. Seven, 7, 8, 7.5, 7.5. Archie Waynes, Plymouth Diving Club. Forward 1.5 somersaults, 2 twists, 3 position. Seven, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5. Lachlan Stark, Edinburgh Diving Club. Inward 1.5 somersaults, pint. Seven and a half, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Adam Turl, Southampton Diving Academy. Back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, 3 position. Five, 5, 5, 5, 6. And our final diver, Conolano, Southend Diving. Back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, 3 position. Seven, 7, 7, 7, 7.5. And that concludes the Group A Boys 1 metre preliminary. Thank you, divers and officials. We'll have the results for you and the results also of the Group B Boys 3 metre very shortly. Thank you. Okay, we have the results from the Group E Boys 3-metre preliminary. In 7th place, Andre Golovati from Southampton Diving Academy, 303.2. In 6th place, Noah Underwood from Plymouth Diving Club, 310.0. 5th, Jed Brown, Southampton Diving Academy, 322.9. 4th, Simeon Gregg from City of Sheffield Diving Club, 348.55. Qualifying as our guest in 4th place, Jackson Monas from Aces Diving Club, 354.6. 3rd place, Robbie Wood, City of Sheffield Diving Club, 359.65. 2nd, Finn McFarlane from Cambridge Dive Team, 361.80. And qualifying in 1st place, Sebastian Wilcox from City of Sheffield Diving Club with a score of 364.7. And all of these divers will be progressing to the final later on today. And can we ask the divers that you have 30 minutes to amend your final dive sheets if you need to do so. And we have the results now of the Group A Boys 1-metre preliminary. In 13th place, Lucas Clayton, Dive London Aquatics Club, 295.85. 12th, Josie Verity, City of Bradford Esprit, 351.0. 11th, Noah Battle, City of Sheffield Diving Club, 360.4. 10th, Daniel Chase, City of Leeds Diving Club, 362.3. 9th, Adam Turl, Southampton Diving Academy, 393.05. And progressing to the final later today in 8th place, Archie Wames, Plymouth Diving Club, 405.6. 7th, Lachlan Stark, Edinburgh Diving Club, 416.3. 6th, Conor Lano, Southend Diving, 422.7. 5th, Lewis Nielsen, City of Sheffield Diving Club, 430.25. 4th, Oliver Heath, Plymouth Diving Club, 431.5. 3rd, Bryn James, Southampton Diving Academy, 440.8. 2nd, Todd Geggers, Southend Diving, 445.1. And qualified for the final in 1st place, Noah Penman from Aberdeen Diving Club, with a score of 451.95.
Divers and coaches, there are 10 minutes remaining of warm-up. 10 minutes remaining. Divers and coaches, please be aware. 5 minutes remaining of warm-up. There's 5 minutes remaining.
Thank you. The boards are now closed. Can we call the athletes, please, for the next two events? The Group B girls 3 metre and the Group A girls platform to make their way to the parade assembly area, please. And can we have judges to seats? Thank you. And in line with our clear decks policy, all bags are to be removed from the poolside and taken to the cool room and must never obstruct the fire escape doors during training. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the judging panel for the Group A Girls Platform Preliminary, your referee and judge number 1 is Kim White. Judge 2, Susie Bamber. Judge 3, Kim Young. Judge 4, Bill Clark. And Judge 5 is Mandy Eby. And the athletes in the Group A Girls Platform Preliminary. Start 1, Hannah Newbrook from Dive London Aquatics Club. Start 2, Rebecca Vega, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Start 3, Tallulah Clark, Dive London Aquatics Club. Start 4, Evie Tierney from Southampton Diving Academy. Start 5, Lily Chandler, Southampton Diving Academy. Start 6, Lucy Parker, Dive London Aquatics Club. Start 7, Etta Dodsworth, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Start 8, Natalie Barr, Southampton Diving Academy. Start 9, Libby Duke, Edinburgh Diving Club. Start 10, Elizabeth Hart from Southampton Diving Academy. And start 11 is Anna Blake from the City of Sheffield Diving Club. And on to the Group B Girls 3-metre preliminary officials. Your referee and Judge 1 is Jane Ogden. Judge 2, James Hadley. Judge 3, Thomas Screeton. Judge 4, Emily Saunders. And Judge 5 is Lindsay Fraser. And your competitors, Start 1, Lexi Clark from Dive London Aquatics Club. Start 2, Sienna Ray Mills from Dive London Aquatics Club. Start 3, Emma Mansfield, Southend Diving. Start 4, diving as our guest, Tallulah Vivalda from PSV Schönspringen and the Plymouth Diving Club. Start 5, Kate Gardner, City of Leeds Diving Club. Start 6, Daisy Lindsay, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Start 7, Kalela McCrickard from Sandwell Diving Club. Start 8, Alice Bilton, Southend Diving. Start 9, Francesca Probert, Southend Diving. Start 10, Lois Bruce, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Start 11, Scarlett DeMello, Edinburgh Diving Club. Start 12, Phoebe Morgan from Dive London Aquatics Club. Start 13, Jessica Nairn from Edinburgh Diving Club. Start 14, Sky Fisheries from Dive London Aquatics Club. Start 15, Caitlin Costa from Dive London Aquatics Club. Start 16, Olivia Sykes, Dive London Aquatics Club. Start 17, Meg Sharman, Edinburgh Diving Club. And finally, start 18, Livia Thomas from the City of Leeds Diving Club. Divers, please make your way to your board and have all judges to seats, please.
Do we have permission from the referee for platform, please? Thank you.
And on 3 metre. Thank you.
Okay, the first diver is Hannah Newbrook, Dive London Aquatics, forward 1.5 somersaults height, 7.5 metre.
And our first diver on the 3 metre, Lexi Clark, Dive London Aquatics Club. Forward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
Seven and a half, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7.
7, 7.5, 6, 6, 6.
Rebecca Vega, City of Sheffield, forward 1.5 somersaults, height, 7.5 metre.
Sienna Ray Mills, Dive London Aquatics Club. Forward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
6.5, 5, 6, 6.5, 6.
5.5, 6, 6, 6, 5.5.
Tallulah Clark, Dive London Aquatics, inward 1.5 somersaults, height, 7.5 metre.
Emma Mansfield, Southend Diving. Inward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
6.5, 5.5, 5, 6, 5.
6, 6, 6, 5.5, 6.5.
Eva Tierney, Southampton Diving, forward 1.5 somersaults, height, 10 metre.
Tallulah Vivalda, PSV, Soon Springer and Plymouth Diving Club. Inward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
7.5, 7, 6.5, 7.5, 6.5. Lily Chandler, City Southampton Diving Academy, forward 1.5 somersaults, height, 10 metre.
6, 6.5, 6, 6, 6. Kate Gardner, City of Leeds Diving Club. Inward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
6.5, 7.5, 7.5, 8, 7. Lucy Parker, Dive London Aquatics, forward 1.5 somersaults, height, 10 metre.
7, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 7. Daisy Lindsay, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Forward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
7.5, 6.5, 8, 7, 6.5. Etta Dodsworth, City of Sheffield, forward 1.5 somersaults, height, 7.5 metre.
6.5, 7, 7, 6.5, 6.5. Kalila McCrickard, Sandwell Diving Club. Forward 1.5 somersaults, pike. 6.5, 6, 6.5, 7, 7.
7.5, 8, 7.5, 7.5, 7.
Alice Bilton, Southend diving, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
Natalie Barr, Southampton diving, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint, 7.5 metre. Seven, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 6.5. Libby Duke, Edinburgh diving, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint, 7.5 metre.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Francesca Probert, Southend diving, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
7.5, 8, 8, 7, 7.5. Elizabeth Hart, Southampton diving, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint, 10 metre.
6.5, 6.5, 7, 6, 6.5. Lewis Bruce, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
7, 6.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7.
7, 7, 7, 6.5, 7.
Hannah Blake, City of Sheffield, back dive pint, 7.5 metre.
Scarlett de Mello, Edinburgh Diving Club, back dive, pint.
7.5, 7, 7, 5.5, 7.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.
Round 2, Hannah, back dive pint, 7.5 metre.
Phoebe Morgan, Dive London Aquatics Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
7, 7, 8, 7.5, 8. Rebecca, back dive pint, 7.5 metre.
6, 6, 6, 6.5, 6. Jessica Nairn, Edinburgh Diving Club, back dive, pint.
6, 6.5, 6, 5.5, 5. Tallulah, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint, 7.5 metre.
6, 6, 6, 6, 5.5. Sky Fisheries, Dive London Aquatics Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
7, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 6.5.
7, 7.5, 7.5, 7, 8.
Evie, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint, 10 metre.
Caitlin Costa, Dive London Aquatics Club, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint. 6, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 5.5.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 5.5.
Olivia Sykes, Dive London Aquatics Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
Lily, back dive pint, 10 metre.
6.5, 6.5, 7, 7, 6.5. Max Sharman, Edinburgh Diving Club, back dive, pint.
6.5, 7, 6.5, 6, 6. Lucy, back dive, pint, 7.5 metre.
6, 6, 7.5, 6.5, 5.5. Olivia Thomas, City of Leeds Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
6, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5, 6. Etta, back dive, pint, 7.5 metre.
6.5, 7, 6.5, 6, 6.5. Round 2, Lexi, back dive, pint.
7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7, 7. Natalie, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint, 7.5 metre.
6, 7, 7, 7, 6. Sienna, back dive, pint.
6, 6, 6, 6.5, 6. Libby, arm stand somersaults, pint, 7.5 metre.
6.5, 6.5, 6, 7.5, 6.5. Emma, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint. 3, please.
7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 6, 7. Elizabeth, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint, 10 metre.
5, 5, 6, 5.5, 5. Taluya, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint. 5, 4.5, 5, 5, 5. Kate, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
6.5, 6, 7, 6, 7. Hannah, reverse dive, pint, 7.5 metre.
7, 7.5, 7.5, 6.5, 7.
7.5, 8, 8, 8, 7.5.
Daisy, back dive, pint.
Round 3, Hannah, reverse dive, pint, 7.5 metre.
6, 5.5, 6, 6, 6.
7.5, 8, 7.5, 8, 8.
Kalila, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
Rebecca, reverse dive, pint, 7.5 metre.
5.5, 5.5, 6, 6, 6. Alice, forward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
6.5, 6, 7, 6.5, 6.5. Tallulah, back dive, pint, 7.5 metre. 4.5, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 4.
5.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.
Evie, reverse dive, pint, 7.5 metre.
Francesca, forward, 1.5 somersaults, pint.
Six, 5.5, 5, 6.5, 6.5.
5, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 5.
Lily, reverse dive, pint, 10 metre.
Lois, back dive, pint.
Seven and a half, 7, 7.5, 7.5, 8.
5, 4.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.
Lucy, back 1.5 somersaults, say half twist, position 3, 10 metre.
Scarlett, reverse dive, pint. Five, 5.5, 5, 4.5.
6, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5, 5.
Phoebe, inward, 1.5 somersaults, pint.
Etta, reverse dive, pint, 7.5 metre.
Five, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5. Jessica, reverse dive, pint.
Seven and a half, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7. Natalie, reverse dive, pint, 7.5 metre.
Five, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Sky, back dive, pint.
6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 5.5. Libby, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint, 7.5 metre.
Seven, 7.5, 6.5, 8, 7.5. Caitlin, forward, 1.5 somersaults, pint.
6.5, 6.5, 7, 5.5, 6. Elizabeth, reverse dive, pint, 7.5 metre.
Six and a half, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5. Olivia, back dive, pint.
6, 6, 7, 5.5, 6. Hannah, arm stance somersault, pint, 7.5 metre.
6, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 5.5. Meg, reverse dive, pint.
7, 6, 6, 6, 6. Round 4, Hannah, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint, 7.5 metre.
7, 7, 7, 7, 7. Olivia, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
7.5, 8, 8, 8.5, 7.5. Rebecca, inward 1.5 somersaults, height 7.5 metre.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Round 3, Lexi, reverse dive, pint.
Six and a half, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6.
6, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6.
Tallulah, back 1.5 somersaults, a half twist, position free, 5 metre.
Sienna, reverse dive, pint.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Evie, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, position free, 10 metre.
5, 5, 5.5, 4.5, 5. Emma, back dive, pint.
3, 3.5, 4, 3.5, 3.5.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 6, 5.5.
Lily, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, position free, 10 metre.
Tallulah, back dive, pint.
6, 6.5, 6, 6, 6.
5.5, 5.5, 6, 6, 5.
Lucy, reverse knife pike, 7.5 metre.
Kate, forward, 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
Seven and a half, 7, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5. Etta, inward 1.5 somersaults, pike, 7.5 metre.
6, 6, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5. Daisy, reverse dive, pike. 6, 7, 7, 7, 6.5. Kalila, back dive, pike.
7, 6.5, 5.5, 6, 6.5. Natalie, back 1.5 somersaults, a half twist, position free, 7.5 metre.
Four and a half, 4.5, 6, 5.5, 4.5. Alice, back dive, pike.
6, 6.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Libby, reverse knife pike, 7.5 metre. Seven, 7.5, 6.5, 6, 6.
5.5, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5, 5.5.
Elizabeth, back 1.5 somersaults, say half twist, position free, 7.5 metre.
Francesca, back dive, pike.
6.5, 4.5, 6, 6.5, 6.5.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.
Hannah, inward 1.5 somersaults, pike, 7.5 metre.
Lois, reverse dive, pike. 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Scarlett, forward, 1.5 somersaults, pike.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 4. Round 5, Hannah, back 2.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, pike, 10 metre.
Five and a half, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Phoebe, back dive, piked.
7, 7, 7, 7, 7.5. Rebecca, forward 2.5 somersaults, pike, 7.5 metre.
5, 6, 5.5, 6.5, 5. Jessica, forward, 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5.5, 5, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Tallulah, arm stand double somersault, piked, 10 metre.
6, 6, 6, 5.5, 6. Sky, reverse dive, piked. 7.5, 8, 7, 7.5, 7.5.
7.5, 5, 7, 6.5, 5.5.
Caitlin, back dive, piked.
Evie, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked, 7.5 metre.
6, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6.5.
5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 4.5.
Olivia, reverse dive, piked.
Lily, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck, 7.5 metre.
6, 5.5, 6.5, 6, 6. Meg, forward, 1.5 somersaults, piked.
3.5, 3.5, 3, 3.5, 3. Lucy, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked, 5 metre.
5.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Livia, back dive, piked.
7.5, 7, 7.5, 7, 7. Etta, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked, 7.5 metre.
6.5, 6.5, 6, 7, 6.5. Round 4, Lexi, inward, 1.5 somersaults, piked. 6, 6, 6, 6, 6.
6.5, 6.5, 6, 6, 6.
Sienna back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
Natalie, inward 2.5 somersaults, pint, 10 metre.
Six, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 6. Emma, reverse dive, pint.
6, 5, 5.5, 5, 5. Libby, arm stand, back double somersault, 1.5 twist, position free, 10 metre.
Five and a half, 6, 6, 6, 6. Taluya, reverse dive, pint.
6, 6.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5.
5, 5.5, 6, 5, 4.5.
Elizabeth, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint, 7.5 metre.
Kate, back dive, pint. 6.5, 7, 6.5, 6, 6.5.
6.5, 6, 6.5, 7, 6.5.
Daisy, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
Hannah, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint, 7.5 metre.
5.5, 6, 6, 6.5, 5.5.
6, 6, 6, 5.5, 6.5.
Kalila, reverse dive, pint.
Francis, Hannah, inward 3.5 somersaults with 10 metre.
5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Alice, reverse dive, pint.
5.5, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Rebecca, inward 2.5 somersaults with 7.5 metre.
5.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 5. Francesca, reverse dive, pint.
5, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.
5, 5, 5, 5, 5.
Tallulah, back 1.5 somersaults, pint, 5 metre.
Lois, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint. 6, 5.5, 6, 6, 6. Scala, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
2, 2.5, 2, 2.5, 2.5. Evie, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck, 7.5 metre.
Seven, 6.5, 7.5, 7. Phoebe, reverse dive, pint.
Six, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 4.5. Lily, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint, 10 metre.
5.5, 6, 6.5, 5.5, 5.5. Jessica, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
Six and a half, 6.5, 6.5, 7.5, 6.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.
Lucy, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint, 7.5 metre.
Sky, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
Four and a half, 4.5, 4, 4.5, 5.5. Etta, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck, 7.5 metre.
7, 7, 6.5, 7.5, 7. Caitlin, reverse dive, pint. Six, 6, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Olivia, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
6.5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Natalie, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint, 7.5 metre.
6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6. Meg, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6. Libby, back 2.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, pint, 10 metre.
6, 5.5, 6.5, 6, 5.5. Livia, back dive, pint.
6.5, 7, 7, 7, 6.5. Elizabeth, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck, 7.5 metre.
5.5, 6, 6.5, 6, 5.5. Round 5, Lexi, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position. 6, 5.5, 6.5, 6, 6.
7, 5.5, 6.5, 6, 5.5.
Sienna, inward 1.5 somersaults, pint.
Hannah, back 2.5 somersaults, pint, 10 metre.
6, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 6. Emma back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 6. Round 7. Hannah. Arm stand back, double somersault, 1.5 twist, position free, 10 metre.
5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Saluya forward, 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position. 6, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 6. Kate, reverse dive, pint.
6, 4.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Rebecca, back 1.5 somersaults, pint, 5 metre.
5.5, 6, 6, 6, 6. Daisy forward, 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
7.5, 7, 7.5, 7, 6.5. Tallulah, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint, 7.5 metre.
5.5, 5, 6, 5.5, 5. Kalila forward, 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position. 5.5, 5.5, 5, 5, 5.5.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 4.5.
Alice forward, 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
Evie, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck, 7.5 metre.
6, 6, 5.5, 6, 6. Francesca back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
5.5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Lily, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck, 7.5 metre.
4.5, 5, 5, 5, 4.5. Lois forward, 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position. 6, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 6.
5.5, 5, 6, 5, 5.
Scala back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
Lucy, back 2.5 somersaults, a half twist, pint, 10 metre.
6, 6, 5.5, 5, 6. Phoebe forward, 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 6, 5. Etta, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twist, position free, 7.5 metre.
6, 5.5, 6, 6, 6. Jessica, forward, 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
Five and a half, 4.5, 4.5, 6, 4.5. Natalie, back 1.5 somersaults, pike, 5 metre.
5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Sky, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
Six, 6, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Libby, forward 3.5 somersaults with tuck, 10 metre.
6, 6, 6, 6.5, 6.5. Caitlin, reverse, 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
Five and a half, 5, 5, 5.5, 4.5.
5.5, 5, 6, 6, 5.5.
Elizabeth, back 1.5 somersaults, pike, 5 metre.
Olivia, forward, 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position. Five and a half, 6, 6, 5.5, 5.5.
7.5, 7, 6.5, 7, 7.
Meg, forward, 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
Hannah, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck, 7.5 metre.
Four and a half, 5, 5, 5, 4.5. Olivia, forward, 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
Seven and a half, 6, 7, 6.5, 6. Final round of dives. Hannah Newbrook, Dive London Aquatics. Forward 3.5 somersaults, piked, 10 metre.
5.5, 5.5, 6, 6, 5.5. Round 6, Lexi, forward, 2.5 somersaults, pite. Six and a half, 6, 6, 6, 6.
6, 6, 6.5, 6, 6.
Sienna, forward, 2.5 somersaults, pite.
Rebecca Vega, City of Sheffield, back 2.5 somersaults, say half twist, piked, 10 metre.
Five, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Emma, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position.
Three and a half, 4, 5, 4, 4. Tallulah Clark, Dive London Aquatics, inward 2.5 somersaults, piked, 10 metre.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5. Tallulah, forward, 2.5 somersaults, pite. 3, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 3. Kate, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
4, 5.5, 5, 4.5, 5. Eva Tierney, Southampton diving, forward 2.5 somersaults, 1 twist, pike, 10 metre.
Five, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 5. Daisy, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked.
3.5, 4, 3.5, 4, 3.
5.5, 5.5, 6, 6, 5.5.
Lily Chandler, Southampton diving, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twist, position 3, 7.5 metre.
Kalila, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked. 5.5, 5, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Alice, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
6.5, 7, 6.5, 6, 6.5. Lucy Parker, Dive London Aquatics, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck, 7.5 metre.
5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 5. Francesca, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked.
6.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Etta Dodsworth, City of Sheffield, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck, 7.5 metre.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Lois, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked. 5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.5.
3, 2.5, 4, 3, 3.
Scarlett, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, 3 position.
Natalie Barr, Southampton diving, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, position 3, 5 metre. 4, 5.5, 4, 4.5, 4.5.
5, 5, 5, 5, 5.
Libby Duke, Edinburgh diving, inward 2.5 somersaults, piked, 10 metre.
Phoebe, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, 3 position. 6, 6, 6, 6, 6.5. Jessica, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked.
7, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7. Elizabeth Hart, Southampton diving, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, position 3, 7.5 metre.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 5. Sky forward, 2.5 somersaults, pint.
Six and a half, 7, 6.5, 6. Hannah Blake, City of Sheffield, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tack, 5 metre.
7, 7, 6.5, 7, 7. Caitlin forward, 2.5 somersaults, pint.
Six and a half, 7, 7, 6.5, 7.
Six, 5.5, 6, 6, 6.
Thank you, divers, judges and recorders. We will have those results after the conclusion of the 3 metre. You have 30 minutes for your divers to attend for the final sheets. If you wish to amend, 30 minutes from now.
Olivia forward, 2.5 somersaults, pint. Six, 6, 6, 6.5, 6.5. Meg reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck. Six, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Livia inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 5. Round 7, Lexi inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Sienna back 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 5.5, 5, 6, 5, 5.5. Emma back 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Taluya back 1.5 somersaults, pint. 5.5, 6, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Kate, reverse 1.5 somersaults, pint. 5, 4.5, 5.5, 5, 4.5. Daisy, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 4.5, 5, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Kalila, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 4, 3.5, 5.5, 4, 3. Alice, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint. 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Francesca, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 4, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4. Lois, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 3.5, 4, 5, 4, 4.5. Scarlett, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Phoebe, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 6, 6, 5.5, 6, 6.5. Jessica, inward 2.5 somersaults with tug. Five and a half, 6, 6.5, 5.5. Sky, inward 2.5 somersaults with tug. Five and a half, 6, 6, 5.5. Caitlin, back 2.5 somersaults with tug. Three and a half, 4.5, 3.5, 4.5, 4. Olivia, inward 2.5 somersaults with tug. Three, 2.5, 3.5, 3, 2.5. Meg, forward 2.5 somersaults, height. Five and a half, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Olivia, forward 2.5 somersaults, height. Five and a half, 6, 5, 5, 6. Final round of dives. Lexi Clark, Dive London Aquatics Club. Back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position. Five and a half, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Sienna Ray Mills, Dive London Aquatics Club. Inward 2.5 somersaults with tug. Four and a half, 4, 5, 4, 4.5. Emma Mansfield, Southend Diving. Inward 2.5 somersaults with tug. 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5. Taluya Vivaldo, PSV Schoenspringen on Plymouth Diving Club, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Three and a half, 3, 4.5, 3.5, 3.5. Kate Gardner, City of Leeds Diving Club, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint. Six and a half, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Daisy Lindsay, City of Sheffield Diving Club, back 1.5 somersaults, pint. Four and a half, 5, 5.5, 5, 5. Galila McCrickard, Sandwell Diving Club, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tug. Four and a half, 4, 4, 5, 4.5. Alice Bilton, Southend Diving, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position. Five and a half, 5, 5, 5.5, 6. Francesca Probert, Southend Diving, inward 2.5 somersaults with tug. Five and a half, 5.5, 5.5, 4.5, 5.5. Lewis Bruce, City of Sheffield Diving Club, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position. Five and a half, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5. Scarlett de Mello, Edinburgh Diving Club, back 2.5 somersaults with tug. Five, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5. Phoebe Morgan, Diveland and Aquatics Club, forward 2.5 somersaults, pint. 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Jessica Nairn, Edinburgh Diving Club. Back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position. Six and a half, 6, 6, 6.5, 6. Sky Fisheries, Dive London Aquatics Club. Back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position. Six, 6, 6, 6, 6.5. Caitlin Costa, Dive London Aquatics Club. Inward 2.5 somersaults with tug. Five, 6, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Olivia Sykes, Dive London Aquatics Club. Back 1.5 somersaults, pint. Four, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 3.5. Meg Sharman, Edinburgh Diving Club. Back 2.5 somersaults with tug. Three and a half, 3.5, 3, 2.5, and 3.5. Our final diver, Olivia Thomas, City of Leeds Diving Club. Back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position. Five, 5, 5.5, 5, 5. And that concludes the Group B Girls 3 metre preliminary. Thank you, divers and officials. We'll have the results for you in a few moments.